the magic he does. He's done my brain mapping, and he's given me a nice baseline to go off of and to know that the products that I've chosen to take are working. I'm going to read off of his card just because he has so many names and masteries. So Chris Wyllie is a neuroplastician. He's a master brain trainer. He's a licensed NLP trainer, Shaolin Qigong and Tai Chi master, superhuman health coach, and also known as the Brain Man. Again, welcome my friend Chris Wyllie.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Are you ready to unlock and unleash your brain's unlimited powers? Yes. Well, as Rebecca said, I'm kind of known as the Brain Man, and I had a brain that was in big trouble, which is how I got into all the things like nootropic, biohacking, brain hacking, brain optimization. Now, all of you, it's a small room, but I want you to raise your hand if you know someone who suffers from anxiety, panic, or worry. If you know someone. Pretty well everyone in the room, right? Now, put your hand up if you know someone who has Alzheimer's. Pretty well everyone in the room. Put your hand up if you know someone who has autism. Do you know someone with autism? No? You know of someone. So pretty well everyone in the room. So as we're seeing, it's not just cancer and heart disease, which are the major killers. Now it's mental illness. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through everything you need to know, very simply, very rapid fire. We only have like 30 minutes. Everything you need to know about nootropics, which are otherwise known as cognitive enhancers. And there's many types of cognitive enhancers. There's natural nutraceuticals like ginseng, rhodiola, ashwagandha. There's chemical synthetic nootropics. This is a lot of guys like the bulletproof Dave Asprey got famous on the internet for saying all the smart drugs and nootropics he was doing. So there's synthetic nootropics, and then there's also baseline nutraceuticals, which basically provide the foundational fuel for neurons to work, like amino acids, like the amino acid L-tyrosine, like the amino acid taurine. Now, the most important thing is that I've been able to specifically quantify and measure and then optimize the effects of nootropics on the brain with various forms of brain imaging. One of which is what I do in my practice now is QEEG brain mapping. So seeing how your brain's functioning like a map of the world, and then once we see what's going on in your brain, if you got certain imbalances, then I'll design specific nootropics for you to take and we'll remap your brain to see immediately how your brain improves. So there's many people, it's basically, when it comes to your brain's your engine. The engine through which all your consciousness flows through and which influences your consciousness and mental state. So basically for me I've always been infinitely fascinated with the brain. And third year university, I had a 4.9 GPA, a full ride scholarship to Harvard Law, MBA, all lined up. I was with my single mom, and so we didn't have the finances for me to be able to go to school unless I got a full ride scholarship. So there was immense pressure, and my whole life I've dealt with anxiety and panic attacks. And in third year university, I was hospitalized with 145 pounds after 3 straight panic and anxiety attacks. And I'd been a naturalist my whole life, and after my second panic attack, I was kind of desperate for a solution to help overcome these silly panic attacks. I'd study for exams and know everything, and then the exam would come and boom, my brain would just go in panic mode. So I tried things like Ritalin, amphetamine, stuff they give to kids, which my upper year friends pop like Skittles. And long story short, they sent my brain into overdrive. It basically amplified all the underlying anxiety centers. I ended up frying and doing damage to my brain. So this is one thing for all of you. If you want to get into cognitive enhancement, nootropics, you have to know how things are actually working in the brain, because otherwise you can fry your brain and get some pretty nasty headaches. You know, if you ever had a headache after eating like Chinese food, well, try messing up choline levels in your brain. You'll get a blasting headache that'll last 2 or 3 days. So we want to be careful what we're doing here. And there's many different types of nootropics. So basically hospitalized, it was 5 a.m. in the morning. I looked at the clock and asked myself, what the hell am I doing? I was in a business program, wanted to go to law degree, so I ended up switching my degree from a business to getting a degree in neuroscience to then pursuing absolutely everything I could to optimize my brain. And as soon as I found out about nootropics and smart drugs, my brain was like, holy smokes. And I went to ordered stuff online from the European pharmacies. I got all this stuff you could, go to the health food store. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars experimenting and putting things to the test in my own brain. And as many times, there was times when I took nootropics and I felt like Superman. And as many times as I did that, there was just as equally as many times when I gave myself a blasted headache and knocked myself out. And it's like, shit, I just screwed the last 3 hours up, the next 3 hours up. So basically, going through third year and fourth year university, I was able to take myself from a state of profound anxiety, panic, stress, type A, to such a high level of performance where my classmates, teachers, and everyone recognized, and they were asking me what I was doing. So this basically gave me a whole playground with which to self-experiment and design brain optimization game plans for different types of people. And I was able to track and measure specific things. I had professors, fourth year university, all they wanted me to do was generate research ideas for them to design studies. So for instance, one of the things is different types of neurological conditions, specifically ADD. So I was involved in research to test different types of nutrition specifically for ADD, one of which was a diet rich with certain nutraceuticals like DHA, L-tyrosine, taurine, and some anti-inflammatory nutraceuticals like curcumin, bacopa, and I was able to see specifically the brain-enhancing effects from that. And this basically led to hundreds and hundreds of people having me design brain game plans for them. People were coming up to me, Chris, what do I eat for my brain? How do I super learn? How do I work out? So I was like, damn, I could just start my own business here. So I basically bought the brain sample form of EEG and neurofeedback to get my feet started off the ground running, and hyperbaric chamber, which I had used, which in combination with all the nutraceuticals amplify things. So one of the things I did is I always like stacking the deck to my advantage. So I'd take some nootropics, I'd go in a hyperbaric chamber. So meanwhile, the hyperbaric chamber is sending all the blood and oxygen to my brain, where then all the nootropics are now completely in the bloodstream, wide open to go to the brain. Now vasodilation, whenever you increase oxygen tensions, you increase vasodilation. So one of the number one things for brain enhancements can be vasodilation, increasing blood flow, because you have a gland called the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland, who here knows what the pituitary gland is? And the pineal gland. Well, the pituitary has this artery called the circle of Willis, which is basically an artery which encircles the pineal gland. So when you vasodilate the blood, you increase your qi in the blood, qigong, tai chi. It helps to release the compound pharmacy in your brain. It helps you to tap all the neurochemicals which are in your brain. So I know here, some of the products here with Elysian is like the mastermind formula. And there's some specific vasodilators in it, like L-arginine, different forms of arginine in there. Also specific nutraceuticals like ginkgo biloba, and there was vinpocetine in the original formulation. So things which are going to help you tap the pharmacy in your brain. So rather than flooding your brain with a specific drug, now you're helping to generate and accelerate your body's own natural factories and production. So before we get into full-out nootropics, brain hacking, brain optimization, I just want to give you a little lowdown, Brain 101. So any of you guys have a neuroscience background, read about brain cells? Yeah. Well, we got one. I'm going to make it real simple for you. So basically, these neurons, you have this cell body. And then branching out from the cell body are all these different dendrites. Imagine like branches of a tree. Now the dendrites, they receive incoming signals from neighboring neurons. And in fact, there's so many brain cells and dendrites in your brain. There's as many brain cells in your brain as there are trees in all of the United States. Think of the billions of brain cells. And then the number of dendrites which receive all the signals, there's the amount of leaves on all those trees. Imagine you see a tree, one neuron has all these different dendrites. And then from the cell body, the dendrites, they basically receive incoming signals from neighboring neurons. And there's many ways you can alter those signals coming in. So there's a space between where one brain cell communicates to another brain cell. It's called the synapse. So you have your dendrites, which goes to the cell body. Then the cell body has something called an axon, which imagine just like this shaft, and it's just blazing electricity down. And the shaft's made of myelin, which is around 80% fat, 20% protein. So in combination with all your nootropics, and in fact there's specific nootropics which help to build the myelin sheaths, like things which raise acetylcholine, you want to have a higher fat diet, or enough sufficient fats for your brain. That's where things like coconut oil, MCT oil, and things come in. So then you have, from the axon, sending these signals, and then all these little dendrites there, which are just waiting to receive them. And that space between is called the synapse. Now, there's many things we want to do and can do to raise neurotransmitter levels. Number one would be to increase the amount of neurotransmitters packaged in those little vesicles, which get poofed, launched into the synapse. So this is where things like amino acids come in, like tyrosine, like taurine, like choline. Then number two is in this little synapse area, this magical place where learning and memory occurs, is we can increase neurotransmitter levels by decreasing the reuptake of neurotransmitters, right? So there's different proteins which are made, which then take the neurotransmitter out of the synapse, and then it's no longer there. A lot of antidepressants and drugs like Ritalin and amphetamines work by blocking that protein, so then the neurotransmitters stay in. And then the third way is by increasing the efficiency of the whole process of the receptors. This is where my favorite nutrient comes in, which is DHA. DHA, who's here heard of the benefits of fish oil for your brain? So DHA is half of every cell membrane, every neuron and receptor for the neurotransmitters. So getting DHA in so that all those receptors have juicy DHA in it to build the cell membrane so they can receive the signal and transmit it, so important. So if all of you, if you're not taking some form of DHA consumption, you really, really are putting your brain at a disadvantage. So DHA is key. And so now we're going to go into different types of neurotransmitters. So what are these neurotransmitters, which are basically your brain juice? Imagine your brain, you have this like soup of all these different neurochemicals. And from that, it stimulates thinking, stimulates your emotions, determines how you feel. Thinking is in part chemical. Now, what we want to be doing is basically imagine every region of your brain. There's these little individual nodes, or like instruments, part of a whole symphony. And what we want to do is we want to just be getting strumming all those trumpets of things like dopamine and norepinephrine, getting tunes of other neurotransmitters like choline going so that everything is balanced and synchronized. So the whole key with your brain neurochemistry is balance. Having the right amount of gas pedal and brakes. You don't want to be going all loose, loose cannon without the brakes on there. Otherwise, you're going to be spinning, with anxiety, with racing thoughts. You're going to wake up with racing thoughts. You'll probably have, perhaps seizures, epilepsy, autism. There's all cases where there's excess gas pedal. We got to build in some more of the brakes. So the main excitatory gas pedal neurotransmitter in the brain is glutamate. Have any of you guys here heard of glutamate? Any of you guys heard of monosodium glutamate? So if you eat Chinese food, let's say, and you're sensitive and you raise glutamate levels and you get a whacking headache,
it's an enhancer.
What's happening in the brain? It's raising glutamate levels and then overexciting brain cells to death. This is what happens when, boom, a concussion happens. A blow to the head. Brain cells are now in a state of crisis, low energy. So now they go into hyperinflammatory, hyperexcitable mode, which raises glutamate, which accelerates brain cell death. So in cases of excess glutamate, what are they? Things like concussion, things like autism, things like seizures, things like tinnitus, which is basically a seizure in the ears, chronic pain, chronic pain with all those pain maps in your brain just constantly activating and activating and activating. So what's the counterpart to that? The counterpart is the neurotransmitter GABA, which is the natural off switch for the brain. It's like your brain's natural Valium to help you to relax. Now, have you ever been talking to someone where they're talking so fast that you can't even make up every word, and it's like, oh my gosh, you stuck to a kid who just came from Guinness Wonderland and they keep talking? Or you talk to an autistic kid where they're going so fast and you're like, oh, slow down, brakes, red, yellow light, yellow light. Pretty good. I have a lot of glutamate in my brain, as you can see. I talk really fast. If you want to be talking really fast, we can do this in speed reading, speed learning. You guys should be up on nootropics right now. You'd be able to process every little thing. There's deficiencies in GABA. So GABA is basically the brakes in the brain. And it's very important specifically in the temporal lobes for learning, memory, and speech specifically. So for autistic kids, for people who have concussions, where there's activity, for those people who have anxiety, chronic pain, we want to increase GABA. Now, what are some ways we can increase GABA? Well, I mentioned some of the neurotransmitters. Some neurotransmitters, amino acids, which raise GABA include like taurine. Taurine. So there's been research studies saying taurine alone, the amino acid, is clinically effective for seizures, for anxiety, for concussions, and for any one of you who wants to optimize your energy. Taurine's a key amino acid. So basically your cell membrane, you have this charge. And taurine helps to keep the proper balance, the proper charge, the proper pH within your cells. So it's mighty important for raising GABA. Now, another super, super awesome way to raise GABA is through L-theanine. And L-theanine's the main amino acid in things like green tea, matcha green tea. And something like green tea raises both dopamine and GABA. So you get this dopamine, gas pedal neurotransmitter, and then GABA to slow things down. So there's the space in between each of the nerve signals. And then other things which are great for raising GABA is specific forms of magnesium. And for most kids, whether it's concussion, whether it's autism, I recommend magnesium threonate for the brain. Now, generally speaking, the best way to raise GABA is through lots and lots of rich flavonoids in your diet. Like, have you guys heard of the benefits of red wine, resveratrol, of cacao, raw chocolate, my favorite superfood? It helps you to relax and stabilizes nerves. So I have autistic kids who can't really eat much. Some of them you can get liquid stuff in. So you can like melt in some raw chocolate with some fats for the brain to deliver those flavonoids. And what they're going to do, they're going to A, reduce the inflammation in the neurons which are sending signals, which are going to help the transmission, and B, they're going to raise GABA. So GABA is mighty important. If you find yourself, who here finds themselves racing inside their head, thoughts spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning? Used to, not anymore? Monkey, hi. So basically, GABA is really important to have the brakes there. And if you know anyone who has panic, anxiety attacks, chronic pain, which is persistent and won't go away, I would recommend you integrate some nootropics which have taurine, which have L-theanine, which have magnesium, which have B vitamins, specifically B6, which have some green tea extract in it, which together will help to stabilize gas pedal and brakes. Now, glutamate, it's important for learning. You got to have enough glutamate so that things, are excited enough, so that things are going fast enough for your brain to work. So this is where things which increase the stimulation in the brain are really, really important. So things that raise glutamate are a lot of nootropics. So there's a lot of synthetic nootropics which I've used, and do I use synthetic nootropics now? No. In fact, I've used so many synthetic nootropics and tried where now my brain cells have hypersensitivity to glutamate. So if I take something that raises glutamate, it's going to overexcite my brain. Now, let's move on to some other neurotransmitters. We only have so much time, but to finish off on GABA there's many different forms of depression, for instance. So, any of you guys know someone who has depression? Well, there's at least 6 different brain patterns for depression. So I had one person who we looked at their brain, and their brain was like locked in. As soon as they got in focus mode, one region was hyperconnected to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. So when the brain activates, it's like jingle bells. And then, depending on whatever the person was thinking, is going to determine her mood. So this person was on antidepressants, which were completely inappropriate for what her brain was doing. All she needed to do was raise something like GABA, so there's more space between communication. Does that make sense? Nice. So, moving on to the next neurotransmitter. I'm going to save my favorite for last. Do any of you guys worry a lot? Or like always take care of others and yourself, you always get left behind? Are any of you worry warts? Do any of you guys?
Not anymore. Worry-free.
Yes, you've overcome it. So you already know what I'm going to say. Why don't you just come up and tell me?
I'm a warrior, not a worrier.
Oh, I love that distinction. We're on the same frequency. Now, do any of you guys, when you're just talking, conversation, things will just go blank? Used to. Well, if so, your brain's probably deficient in the neurotransmitter choline. Acetylcholine basically is the governor of your brain speed. So if you talk to people and it's like, damn, that person is sharp, their brain just is firing, their communication's very clear and precise. Acetylcholine is the governor of brain speed. Acetylcholine's also a part of all the cell membranes and part of that myelin which sends nerve communications. So raising acetylcholine is very important. Now you look at the Einsteins, the geniuses of the world. Their brains were found to have lots of acetylcholine, which increased the functioning of the parietal lobes. The parietal lobes, which are involved in mathematical, visual, spatial, sensory, kinesthetic processes. In math, for instance, is kinesthetic. So really your creative IQ is governed by acetylcholine. And if you're overcome with stress, if you feel that your memory is deteriorating from stress, or if you feel that your brain's overly rigid, then acetylcholine is probably deficient. Now, there's many forms of ways to get acetylcholine. One of my favorite acetylcholine boosters is phosphatidylserine, PS. So PS, you want to get some PS. It reduces cortisol levels in the brain, stress. Now, at the extreme, who here, has an idea of what the extreme of acetylcholine falling off a tree, cortisol levels rising? What do you think the disorder that happens in?
Adrenal fatigue?
Acetylcholine falling off a cliff, cortisol stress high, a brain that's stressed and deteriorating. What's that called? Alzheimer's. Now, in Alzheimer's, acetylcholine falls off a cliff. And in fact, Alzheimer's, there's this associated with this ApoE4 gene, which basically just makes it so brain cells can't use cholesterol and can't use glucose well. So it sends an energy crisis. So things like the choline don't get to the brain, and therefore the brain's stressed, raises cortisol, and the brain deteriorates. So acetylcholine's mighty important. And did you know that just in 2 hours, for instance, how many here, can you take a guess on how many brain cells you lose in 2 hours? The average person. 6,500. Now, if you have a brain that has Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, what do you think the rate goes up to? 60,000 to 600,000 per 2 hours. So if you're talking about nutritional interventions to protect your brain, this is where things like nutraceuticals and brain nutrition become essential. Because the thing is, whether it's autism, whether it's Alzheimer's, you can have the underlying genes which make you susceptible, but it's the environment that lights the match, the foods you put into your body. So acetylcholine boosters, phosphatidylserine, other ones like CDB choline, other ones called, this is more chemical, would be central phenoxin, But the PS is really good. Lots of different forms of choline, phosphatidylcholine. I know in the Mastermind blend there's definitely some choline boosters, which will help reduce stress and increase your brain. Now moving along here, we're going to go to the next neurotransmitter. Who here has had an experience where they're just like, whoa, a mind-brain opening experience? Perhaps it was doing something illicit, like smoking dope. Perhaps it was meditating and having kumbaya moments. Who here has had such an experience? And if you hadn't, I recommend it, because you're probably too tense and your brain's probably a little tight. We need to loosen things up. Now, serotonin is the major mood-enhancing, stress-vaporizing neurotransmitter. You see, there's this dynamic balance between serotonin, which increases the plasticity and flexibility of your brain, allows you to get into different states of consciousness, basically takes this brain, which may be hardwired, and adds fluidity to it. So there's more flexibility in the brain. So ways to raise serotonin are meditation, yoga, qigong, and with that, lots of great herbs, natural nootropics. Things like bacopa help to increase GABA, help to increase serotonin efficiency. Now, above all, for raising serotonin is DHA. Now, most people don't know this, but 60% of the serotonin in your body's produced by gut cells. The rest is in the pineal gland. So, what's critically important is that the DHA is half the membrane for those cells in the gut, which then activate the vagus nerve, which help to release the brain. So, are any of you guys having a hard time sleeping at night or getting deep sleep? Not anymore. You guys must be on Mastermind already or something. So basically, serotonin helps to increase delta brainwaves, slow, deep brainwaves, which help you to regenerate and help to increase the plasticity of the brain, dreaming at night. So serotonin's key. Now there's this dynamic dance between serotonin and then the neurotransmitter of this new millennium, dopamine. Who here's heard of dopamine? Dopamine, dopamine, dopamine. Who here's a slave to coffee? Who here would be angry as can be if they couldn't get their coffee in the morning? Yep. Yeah, so there's a dopamine deficiency there. Dopamine's the gas pedal neurotransmitter that increases your mood, increases your focus. When you're in love, dopamine's through the roof, and you can work, with little to no sleep. When dopamine's high, basically, all drugs work by raising dopamine, whether it's amphetamines, Ritalin, Adderall, cocaine, sugars, for goodness sake. All raise dopamine. And now here's one principle you all have to know about your brain. Your brain works perfectly. What this means is your brain will always seek to self-regulate. So if there's imbalances in your brain, do you find yourself zoning out, or did you zone out in class? Do you have kids which are just fidgeting all over the place? Their brains are trying to self-correct, to raise dopamine so it can increase focus, pattern recognition. But unfortunately, the main thing is, when you're low in dopamine, you're going to be drawn towards high-return foods, like simple sugars, like illicit behaviors, like things, which are going to give you a short high, but then ultimately reduce dopamine. So, many ways to raise dopamine. Of course, the main way is through DHA, of course. Now, other ways to raise dopamine are amino acids such as L-tyrosine, lots of herbs like ginseng, ashwagandha, all work by raising dopamine. And then in combination with that, so basically what you want to do is have your brain chock full with all these neurochemicals to start your day. So that way when you wake up, your brain is full of all these resources. So then rather than trying to go out and find something to give your brain a boost, to self-correct, your brain's already chock full with all those neurotransmitters which are going to make you focus, which are going to build willpower, which are going to build brain power, which are going to get you making good decisions and thinking. So thinking and planning requires high levels of neurotransmitters. So for instance, dopamine, forethought, planning, executive function, decision making. If you're hesitating and spinning your wheels, dopamine's the one that says save that one, that locks in the pattern, that gets you moving forward. Now number 2, we talked about acetylcholine. Acetylcholine's your creative IQ, your intuition, your brain speed, your analytical abilities, especially important for kids in school and for you in your business, raising acetylcholine levels. Number 3 is your social IQ. So how well you empathize and relate to others. Now, who do you think's better, women or guys at relating to others? Women. Because they have more GABA in their brains. Guys, we have more glutamate. So GABA is what helps us slow down and connect to people. So if you're finding yourself, connecting less and less, your brain's probably deficient in GABA. And then third is your perceptive IQ, your vision, your perspective, your ability to generate new thoughts and new thinking. That's where serotonin comes in. Okay? Now, real quickly, we have 3 minutes. So there's different types of nootropics. Number 1 are vasodilators, things which increase blood flow. Increase blood flow, you increase metabolism in the brain. Number 2 are cholinergenics, things which raise choline, which increase brain speed. Number 4 are dopamine boosters. This is where all the stimulants and things like Ritalin, amphetamines, and coffee come in. Now, the thing is, if you're taking a stimulant, it isn't necessarily a cognitive enhancer because you're just amplifying whatever underlying brain patterns there. So I had one client who I just mapped his brain on Saturday, and he told me, yeah, I drink all my coffee and I feel charged, but my brain is, just more squirrel phenomenon, just hopping around even more. That's where if you can preload your brain with things that raise dopamine beforehand, it'll help you to not only charge your brain, but also focus it. So this is where combining adaptogens with coffee is important. And I know in the mastermind formula, there's ashwagandha, there's rhodiola, there's some ginseng. So those herbs with the stimulant will amplify a new, more coherent brain pattern. Does that make sense? And then lastly, there's the things which, raise glutamate in the brain. Because glutamate does increase learning, memory, and abilities. And that's where some of the synthetic things come in. But through all my years and through my experiences, I've done the synthetic route. I've done all the nootropics. I've done all the amino acids. And I've gotten to the point now where the only nootropics I use are natural herbs and a few amino acids to stimulate my brain. So you might as well save yourself all the time, all the experimentation, all the headaches, and go right to the natural stuff right here. And that's where there's a lot of formulas. I mean, you all should be taking a DHA supplement. If there's specific questions you have in regards to, I know someone who has Alzheimer's, or I just can't get it out of my head, or I have chronic pain, or I have stress, you have any questions about which specific nootropics would be right to you, I hope I covered most of them, but we only had 20 minutes. I could spend days talking about this. So I wanted to thank you all for being here. I look forward to answering any questions you have, and optimize your brain. And most importantly, quantify your brain. Every one of you is a unique brain, so the combination of nutraceuticals which will be right for you will be unique. So your experiences may rhyme, but each one of you will have your own result, your own symphony of experience which will be unique to you. So congratulations, you are the only one in this world who has a brain just like you. Aren't you special?